again, we want to hit on a fan base they're on cloud nine, high expectations. They've yet to win 10 games a season under Jimbo Fisher. Of course, they would have the COVID year, as they like to point out, but this could be the year they finally break through and reach that 10-game mark, don't you think?
I think so. I think there's a lot of reason for optimism. I think the expectations are certainly getting higher, but also I think there's reason for that. When you bring in the number one recruiting class and you see some of the talent that's coming through College Station, the expectations and projections rise.
Right.
I think if you're an A&M fan, I think first of all we just talked about DJ Durkin and how valuable he was to Ole Miss. I think certainly A&M has turnover up front. They will start to cycle all the 5-star and 4-star guys that they have in.
Yeah, poor A&M.
Yeah, they just 62 5-star guys coming through on the defensive line. I think that group's going to be fine. There's going to be some turnover, and maybe those 5-stars don't produce at all SEC level right away. But man, the secondary is going to be so good this year, and I like what they're building in terms of depth and talent on that side of the ball. Also, I think the quarterback room. Last year, Haynes King getting hurt against Colorado was, just took a setback to the offense. But this year you have Max Johnson, you have Connor Wigman, the freshman. It is in a much better place. So overall, it feels like the roster talent here is starting to build, which is why you're starting to see those expectations rise. And certainly I think 8-4 last year was, we don't know how the quarterback injury would have played out, but I think it certainly played a role in this team getting to 4-4 in the SEC and 8-4 overall.
And you talk about that standout defensive backs. I mean, A&M may have the best defensive backfield in the conference. That should really serve them well, don't you think, with all the arms we got in the SEC this year?
No question, especially potentially the game against Alabama. We'll see what happens with Jackson Dart at Ole Miss and certainly with LSU. But you have KJ Jefferson, you have Will Rogers. So, and then not to mention crossover play is Spencer Rattler at South Carolina, Anthony Richardson at Florida. So, yeah, I think coming into the season, what was interesting about doing the all-SEC team was McKinley Jackson was Texas A&M's only selection for us at Athlon Sports on there. But also you can start to see like all these other guys that are maybe not established yet. Like you could see somebody out of that group, projection-wise, whether it's Lucas or Turner or Nolan or somebody by the end of the year might be in that rising star category to make, second, third team all SEC by the end of the year.
Now you hit on the quarterbacks. Where would you go with this one? Because every time I talk to someone down there in College Station, Haynes King, they all love Haynes King. They think he's a future superstar. And Aggies are probably tired of me even saying this, but, I favor Max Johnson.
I do too.
And maybe it's experience that I've seen him. Maybe it's, he had his ups and downs certainly in Baton Rouge, but I think a lot of that had to do with, poor offensive line. I think they had really bad offensive play callers the last 2 years, so I don't know how much we can even put on Max Johnson. But so you're more on board with me there, Max Johnson?
Yeah, I think so. I think maybe a weird way to say this. I think Haynes King and Wigman have way more upside potentially. I think Max Johnson is not necessarily safe, but I think you know what you'll get out of him each week, and I think the mobility out of Haynes King could be valuable, especially potentially down the season with games against Alabama and others. I think one reason I would sort of lean towards Max Johnson is I think he's already established in the SEC. You know what you're getting out of him when you have to play even games against App State, Miami, Arkansas, at Mississippi State early. Like they're going to be tested right away, and I think he'll probably do a good job taking care of the ball. A&M needs more big plays out of the passing game. And so I trust a quarterback like him, but I could also see why they go with Haynes King. I think the upside is there. The mobility is a different sort of angle to that offense, but it gets at the point I think A&M's in a much better position in terms of quarterback play this year.
Now, I loved Isaiah Spiller. Everybody did very, very productive back, but now we got Devon Achane coming in here. Human highlight reel. I think he led the SEC in yards per carry. With like 9 yards per carry, something insane like that. Could he be a guy that I know A&M fans are well aware who that is, but I don't know if the rest of the SEC, could that be a guy that could be a household name in the SEC?
No question. I think breakout player, player on the rise, whatever kind of category we could use here. A&M fans know how good he's been. I mean, as far as, whether it's returns, whether it's brushing the ball, Also, it helps that A&M's offensive line is probably going to be better this year too. Steve Adazio, the new offensive line coach, who's been a head coach at BC and
Mm-hmm.
Colorado State, a really interesting hire. So you have an improving offensive line with a player who's extraordinary talented in Achane that I think he's just going to be the amount of focus that Jimbo puts on the running game and running backs. The opportunities will be there this season. So we have him pretty high in our All SEC team. I know he was in my consideration to be All American this year. I think he's having a breakout year.
And then early in the year, they host Miami. Very intriguing matchup. What can you tell A&M fans about the Hurricanes? And you go over this staff. I mean, I love Kevin Steele, Charlie Strong. Maybe not as a head coach, but he's just an assistant here.
Yeah. Josh Gaddis,
Josh
too.
Gaddis, who just won the Broyles for top assistant coach. I mean, they have stacked it like an all-star staff. I still think players matter more than coaches, but Miami's got a pretty talented team too, don't they?
Yeah, I used this analogy on our podcast, so I'm going to use it again, is Miami basically took a seat that, they saw the big boys table this offseason in the ACC, pulled up a chair and said, we want to be a part of it. And it was not only hiring Mario Cristobal, it's that they committed resources to staffing, facilities, recruiting, all that stuff that you need. So Miami's not, the U back of that we saw in the 90s and early 2000s. But I think they'll be better this year, especially under Cristobal. They've got a good quarterback in Tyler Van Dyke. He's one of the ACC's best quarterbacks, probably one of the top 15 in college football. Big concerns though on defense. It was not great at tackling last year. Kind of struggled. They've added some transfers, so I think you'll see a Miami team that's evolving. I think if you're buying stock in Miami, it's down the road.
Mm-hmm.
This year, they're probably the best team in the ACC Coastal, but that's a game that A&M should be favored and should win early in the season.
Now, last thing on A&M, aside from Alabama, which will obviously be just an incredibly difficult game to win, even though they did beat them last year, what's the toughest conference game you think, again, aside from Alabama, at Mississippi State, Arkansas on a neutral field, at South Carolina? I mean, none of these are going to be layups. Ole Miss, Florida coming to town, at Auburn, LSU there in the finale. Which one of those games stands out?
I think if I'm a Texas A&M fan, I wouldn't love the timing of those road trips to Mississippi State and South Carolina because you have the Alabama game sandwiched in between there. You do have a bye week after playing Alabama before going to South Carolina. So I think those road trips in terms of timing are extremely tricky. Certainly there's the revenge factor coming against Arkansas because of Arkansas winning last year. So there's a lot of intrigue for me. I think if I was an A&M fan, the one that probably would have me the most concerned would be that Arkansas-Mississippi State stretch right before